If you've played Fire Emblem or really almost any strategy game against a computer opponent, then you'll know that targeting priority is one of the most critical things to understand that most games will rarely teach you. Who will an enemy unit attack if they don't see a kill? When will an enemy retreat to heal? Why are they just standing there, menacingly, while I move all the way around the map? Hello everybody, this is Mithril Zenith, and today I'm going to unpack the complexities of Fire Emblem's AI script, explaining how it evolved over time, and summarize it all in a somewhat reasonable time frame. I can't promise that this is a perfect masterclass, as I don't have access to the code and there might be some details that I forget or get wrong, but consider this a guide to the general concepts across the whole series. That said, there is a lot to unravel here, so leave a like, share the video with a friend, and let's get on with it. Because there is a lot of nuance to cover in this video, I will separate it into section topics with timestamps in the description. First, I'm going to go over the different types of general AI that exist in Fire Emblem, roughly what each script does, and some examples of them. This will not be an all-inclusive list of every single distinct AI pattern in the games, so if you know any that I missed or forgot, leave them in the comments. Second, I'm going to use that basis of AI types to create a roadmap of general AI trends across the series, rules that are true at least more often than not. After that groundwork is laid, I will be giving every main series game its own passover to see what holds true, what's unique, and what uniquely does not make any sense at all. Enemies in Fire Emblem have multiple AI scripts that they can follow. These names are largely used by the community or myself. Passive AI. Passive enemies do absolutely nothing on enemy phase, usually until something triggers a change in their AI script. They will not move, even if your units are in range, and they will not attack you even if you are standing next to them. They also don't usually switch to healing AI if injured. Truly passive AI is rare, with the only examples that I can think of off the top of my head being the thief who holds the light sphere in the original FE1, and the wyverns in FE3 Book 2 Chapter 3, so long as you don't visit the armory by the castle. Stationary enemies act like RTS units on hold position. Similar to passive units, they won't move, but they will attack if one of your units ends their turn within their weapon range. The most common forms of stationary AI are on most bosses. However, ballistas, siege tomes, and status staff users are often stationary as well. There are also some rare instances of stationary melee units, including a few enemies in Fire Emblem 6 Chapter 8X, and Fire Emblem 8's Chapter 12 Erica, Village of Silence. Defensive AI is far more common than passive or stationary, and in some games forms the bulk of most enemies. Defensive enemies will move to attack your units, but will only do so when you enter their attack range. Some games do not move their defensive enemies if the unit doesn't fit that game's definition of a viable target defined later, but others will still move even if they don't attack. Some common variants of defensive AI includes double target AI, where enemies will only pull if 2 or more enemies are in range of the same unit, most common in Fire Emblem 12. Double move AI, where the aggro range of enemies are 2 turns of movement instead of 1, such as the wyverns in Fire Emblem 6 Chapter 7. And linked AI, where as soon as one unit gets pulled, all the units in the linked group will pull at the same time. The way defensive AI is handled once no more units are in range varies from game to game. Sometimes they will try to return to their initial location, sometimes they will remain at their new location, sometimes they will fully change scripts to aggressive AI. Aggressive AI is another very common AI script, where enemies will charge at their chosen target using the fastest, most direct route available. If a unit is in their attack range, they will target them, but if not, they will pick a unit to move towards. Usually the AI will move towards the closest unit, but sometimes they will lock onto a particular unit and follow them so long as a viable path exists. Mindless is a sub-variant of the aggressive AI, which is generally given to units that are supposed to be unintelligent, such as the Revenants of Fire Emblem 8. This AI type is more prone to random variants than others within the same game engine, and tend to attack units more based on their proximity than their actual stats, although, as randomness is a factor, you cannot guarantee that putting a unit closer to them will successfully distract them. There are also special AI groups. These groups are not all inclusive, and while I don't have time to go over every single unique AI script that exists, there are a few special cases that still deserve a mention because of how ubiquitous they tend to be. Thieves and bandits are sometimes given what I will call pillaging AI, with a few distinctions between thieves and bandits. Usually they will target a specific goal, either a chest or a village, and move towards that. If a bandit destroys a village, it will then check for any other villages and move to destroy them. If no more villages remain open, it will usually revert to aggressive AI. If one of your units is in attacking range, some bandits, such as GBA Fire Emblem bandits, will attack instead of moving to the village, but others, such as Fire Emblem 9's Chapter 9 Pirates, will prioritize the village if the path is not fully blocked. There can be some variation in this behavior within the same game or even within the same chapter, so be aware of this. If a thief reaches their goal, if it required a resource such as a key or a lockpick and they no longer have one, then they will move to an escape point. If they still have one or a resource is not required, then they will move to the next goal, chest, or door, and repeat until no goals are left, at which point they will then move to an escape point. Thieves on Pillage AI will usually ignore your units if any viable path to their goal exists. A subsection of thieves have a different AI script, in which they will try stealing from your units instead of attacking them or ignoring them. These thieves do not generally seek goals, but some rarely use this behavior when seeking a goal that has been blocked. Healing AI is an optional AI switch in most games, where a unit passing below a certain HP threshold, usually about half, will stop its default script and replace it with one wherein they seek after healing, and will not switch back until they pass above a higher HP threshold, oftentimes until fully healed. These units will run to healing tiles, retreat to healers, or in some cases find a healing item on a different enemy and trade with them to use it. If they already have a healing item, they might retreat to what they consider a safer tile, usually one with a defensive bonus or one outside of your attack range if possible. Some healing AI scripts will allow units to attack once they are standing on a healing tile, but others will make them passive until they have fully healed. Healing AI also activates any healers nearby the wounded enemy, prompting them to move or more actively target the wounded enemy. Formation AI is a movement pattern in which units will always attempt to maintain a specific formation when traveling across the map, to the point where they will deliberately move at a reduced movement rate. Units moving in formation can usually be tricked into breaking formation and attacking if you put a valid target in their range. This AI pattern is seen primarily in Fire Emblem 4, with blocks of units moving around a commander. Gather Point AI is fairly rare, mostly featuring on various wyverns in Fire Emblem 7, such as Unfulfilled Heart or Victory or Death. In short, it is a variant on Defensive AI, but instead of staying where they are until your units enter their range, they will move as close as they can to a fixed point, and then stay there until a unit enters their attack range. Another rare form of AI is Strafing AI, where an enemy will always try to stay outside of your attack range. Enemies with Strafing AI normally have a switch during the map that changes their script, and are often units with plot significance, most notably Minerva in her appearances in Fire Emblem 1, Fire Emblem 11, and Fire Emblem 3 Book 1. Before we get into the game-by-game breakdown, let's give a bit of an overhead view of the general decision tree of AI depicted here in pseudocode. First, decide who moves first. Most games have a set movement order that they are required to follow, but other games, particularly modern games like Engage, are more flexible and have different ordering priorities. Next, figure out what stance the unit is in. This will determine whether the AI will choose a target and/or move, or if special conditions exist which alter their behavior. This also is where hit points are checked to see if the AI will instead operate under Healing AI as described previously. After that, if the AI is in a stance capable of attacking, they will decide if a valid target is in range. I will use the term valid target because some Fire Emblem AI have weird tendencies over who they will or will not attack, and some behaviors change if the only units within range are not valid for whatever reason. If a valid target is not in range, AI will branch into a passive decision cycle. Defensive AI may stop or return to their original position. Aggressive AI may move towards you unless no viable path exists. and so on and so forth. Certain AI patterns may assume that if their only viable targets are blocked by other units, they will not move at all, but others will still move to get as close to their target as possible even if they cannot attack, which can be combined with AI move order to do things in certain games like getting archers to move themselves into melee range. If instead a valid target is in range, the AI must now determine if multiple valid targets are in range, and if so, will then calculate who to attack based on a number of factors that vary heavily from game to game, but usually include things such as proximity to target, damage dealt, hit rate, crit rate, chance to kill, chance to receive damage or die in return, and so on and so forth. This target priority is mostly what we will break down in our game-by-game analysis. If absolutely everything about these units is equal, the AI will decide randomly who to target out of their most valid targets. Once a target is decided upon, the AI will check if it has multiple weapons, and if so, which one to use. If a weapon has a much higher damage, or is effective, then it will usually use that, unless its hit rate is considered too low. Once all of that is done, and the unit has moved, and maybe attacked, or done some other action, then the AI will move to the next unit, and the process will continue until every enemy unit has been processed. And with that, I think we have all of the baseline information we need to start getting into the game-specific details. So let's travel back in time to Fire Emblem 1 and see what specific AI quirks we are working with. The AI in the very first Fire Emblem game is basic. No enemy has multiple weapons, enemy weapons and items don't lose durability, and the AI is both very simple and somewhat random. The elephant in the room for Fire Emblem 1, and the thing we should talk about first, is Marth. If an enemy unit considers Marth a viable target, they will prioritize him over any other unit within range. So, what is a viable target in Fire Emblem 1 and why does it matter? Well, if you have enough defense that the enemy will deal 0 damage to you, or if the enemy is a mage and your unit has used a talisman, then they will not consider you a viable target and will not attack you on enemy phase. This goes beyond just not attacking you for aggressive enemies, who will completely ignore you and run past you to get to weaker targets behind your units. As for who the enemy attacks when multiple non-Marth units are viable targets and are in range, it becomes a little more unclear. All else being equal, an enemy will choose to attack the same unit it has attacked before, and usually prioritizes closer units to farther away ones. It will try to take advantageous terrain, and prefers to attack units which it deals the most damage to, but it doesn't seem to care whether it one-shots a unit or not. If an aggressive AI has no viable targets, it will move towards whoever is the closest unit and just stand next to them. If there is no path to a viable target, then even aggressive AI will stop all of its movement. The AI in Fire Emblem 1 follows a very strict action order, preset by the map, and it will never deviate from it. If one unit dying would free up another unit to move, if that unit was in an earlier action slot, then it will still not move, as it has passed its turn. Healers in Fire Emblem 1 are also worth mentioning. As staves used by the AI have no limit, healers are instead given a random chance every turn to attempt to use their healing staves. This is most easily seen on maps where a healer has Fortify. The healer will usually be ordered at the end of the enemy phase, and will sometimes use Fortify even when there are no injured enemies on the map, or will sometimes not use it even if many units are near death or in healing AI. As far as I can tell, it is not scripted by turn, and instead is a completely random chance to heal. The final quirk of Fire Emblem 1 AI that I want to point out is that if a throne or gate is left vacant, usually by the boss dying, but sometimes by the boss moving away, such as Michaelis, an enemy unit in defensive stance, or at the very least a mobile enemy unit without a valid target in range, will sometimes move onto the throne themselves. This is most commonly a healer, but can sometimes be other enemy units. Moving on to Gaiden, not a lot of fundamentals have changed, but there are a few major features that need mentioning. First, there is no Marth, and there is not the same fixation on Alm or Celica as Fire Emblem 1's enemies had for Marth. Second, as all attacks deal a minimum of 1 damage and there is no talisman or talisman glitch, all of your units are technically valid targets at all times. Because of this, the AI has started developing. It is not yet at the point where it will always aim for maximum damage, but it will tend to focus on targets that cannot retaliate if given that option, followed by units that are weaker, and then units that they can deal more damage to. You would think that hit rate would be more of a consideration, especially on Gaiden's massive avoid bonuses from terrain, but unless the AI has literally zero chance to hit, that will not seem to change their decision making. Beyond this, the AI will primarily attack whichever one of your units is closest, changing only if it sees a kill or occasionally decides to pile on one random unit. Similar stickiness from it picked a unit as a valid target and therefore will only attack that unit until it is no longer valid sometimes seems to apply from Fire Emblem 1. The two biggest unique traits about Gaiden AI that need to be mentioned are Witches and Cantors, with teleportation and summoning respectively. Both seem to operate similar to healers in Fire Emblem 1. There is a random chance every turn that any given witch will teleport, or that any given cantor will attempt to summon. This seems to happen less often on consecutive turns, but it is not hard-coded onto specific turn numbers. Now, as for who witches will target when they teleport, this seems random as well, but they are most likely to target units at the back of your army, particularly isolated units, as they will most likely teleport to locations where they will then move their full movement range and barely be able to attack your unit. So if you want a witch to target a higher resistance unit such as a cleric, leaving them alone at the back of your army may draw their attention. This may not always work, but it has the highest likelihood of attracting teleport attention. Something of note is that Teleport AI does not always consider terrain when choosing a teleport destination, so they may sometimes teleport onto the other side of a wall from which they cannot actually attack your units. There also appears to be a bug in Teleport AI where witches will teleport to the corner of the map instead of onto one of your units. I'm not fully sure what causes this error, but my best guess is that there is a setting of target location at the top left corner of the map, and if the witch chooses to teleport but cannot decide on a unit to target, it may go there instead. This seems to happen more often if you have fewer units than the maximum number of deployable units, but again, that is unreliable. Mystery of the Emblem and the Super Famicom engine has a more advanced AI script than the Famicom was capable of, and it shows, though the AI may still exhibit some odd behavior. Unfortunately, in my testing, this odd behavior was showcased to the limit. While the AI should have a priority list of seeking kills or dealing the most damage, occasionally it will still get stuck attacking the nearest target or the most recently attacked target. I was unable to discern any specific rhyme or reason for this. These clips of Navarre and the bandits from Chapter 3 show that the AI just kind of feels its way through the script. Healing AI also returns, though enemies are not capable of trading with each other just yet. Healers are smarter now that they have to consider staff uses, and will only use their staves if a viable healing target is injured. Once their threshold has been met at least once, the healer is now active, and will never deactivate until there are no more injured enemies to heal. This may result in funny behavior, such as the clerics in Alrian's map in Book 2 constantly moving towards whoever is injured, only to stop and walk back towards their starting positions when there are no more injured enemies. When talking about Fire Emblem 4, Genealogy of the Holy War, we first need to make a distinction around what the heck Clever Mode is. Clever Mode is a setting unlocked for players who have completed the game at least once. It is an AI switch that makes a few changes to how enemies act, but in order to explain it properly, we need to first cover how the normal game AI works. Fire Emblem 4 features what I will refer to as shackled AI. This is a term that I've stolen from XCOM, wherein it is used to describe AI patterns in which the AI will deliberately use subpar moves, shackling its potential lethality. In XCOM, that means that on lower difficulties, aliens may choose not to act at all if they are suppressed, or may move into an Overwatch shot that they otherwise may have avoided, among other behaviors. This shackling of AI is, for me, a questionable design tactic, as it can reinforce bad player behaviors by not teaching them of their mistakes that they are making while they're still playing the lower, less punishing difficulties. Fire Emblem 4 features a similar degree of shackling, at least on normal settings. The AI priority is pretty straightforward. It will prioritize dealing damage, but will normally focus on getting kills if possible. It will attack units that are lower on hit points or have weaker weapons, and will generally only treat units as not valid targets if they deal 0 damage or have 0% chance of hitting, most commonly when at weapon triangle advantage and having a speed boosting legendary weapon like Forsetti. Though shackling comes into play when, randomly, the AI will decide to not follow that script. This is a random chance, but appears to be connected to a number of leadership stars the squad leader has, with 5 stars being effectively 0% chance for shackling. When shackled, the AI may sometimes split its attention, randomly sending 1 or 2 units in a squad to attack an entirely different unit than the rest of the squad is targeting. These decisions only care if the unit is deemed a valid target. So long as they have a chance to hit and can deal at least 1 damage, the Fire Emblem 4 AI script may randomly determine that any one of your units is a better target than whatever the priority script says. This may result in, for instance, Beowulf deciding to attack the much more powerful Sigurd, who one-rounds him on enemy phase with a silver sword, rather than attacking the pitiful and near-death Alec, who is currently wielding a broken weapon and would do minimal damage whilst taking significantly more. I liken normal Fire Emblem 4 AI to fighting game AI scripts, like the old Mortal Kombat games, where the AI knows exactly how to counter your moves because it is reading your inputs, but its difficulty setting will determine how often it will randomly decide to not counter you, letting your attacks land without the proper counter. Fire Emblem 4 will randomly perform subpar moves knowing that they are subpar. I feel like this was intentionally put into the game specifically because of the way that Fire Emblem 4 maps were designed, where large squads of units follow commanders and all move in sync. Because it is incredibly difficult to peel enemies away from their squad, you can often end up with one unit being targeted by a dozen or more enemies without much in the way of choke points to defend yourself, even more so because of what's been dubbed Super Kando, allowing cavalry to use the rest of their movement after attacking, and you can bet the Fire Emblem 4 AI knows how to use this to attack with their entire squad at once through a bridge or a forest. Clever Mode does one simple thing. Clever Mode removes shackling. It acts as if the AI will always be under the command of a 5-star leader. The AI will always follow its script. It will prioritize kills, then dealing damage, having a higher focus on units with low HP or low durability weapons, then will prioritize minimizing the damage they take after that. That is pretty much all that Clever Mode does. Sorry to shatter the mystery for you. If anything, because the AI will always follow its script in Clever Mode, I personally find Clever Mode tends to be easier because the AI won't act unpredictably. Sure, it may mean my unit math has to be spot on, but I was doing that math anyway, at least this way I can guarantee things will work out the way they're supposed to. One quirk of Fire Emblem 4 AI is that while the AI will always use its most powerful weapon when given the chance, it has a high tendency to attack at 2 range if it has a choice, letting your archers see more enemy phase counterattacks than they otherwise would. The final thing to cover about Fire Emblem 4 is the introduction of status staves into the series, with their own targeting priority. Obviously, the AI must follow the game's rules regarding status staves, where it cannot inflict them upon units with more res than the staffer has magic, but beyond that it is a bit less clear what their targeting priority actually is. Without a roll to hit, no damage dealt, and no retaliation, none of the traditional targeting parameters function. As far as I'm aware, it might as well just be random across valid targets. Thracia 776 has an incredibly robust and talented AI script, arguably more dynamic than any other Fire Emblem game, including the most recent Engage. Targeting priority has not changed overly much, enemies still prioritize kills, then dealing damage, then avoiding counters, with hit rates, crit rates, and weapons being considered. That said, a few new mechanics have a heavy impact on the veracity of the AI. First and most obvious is capture. If the AI has a higher constitution than one of your units, they may attempt to capture them instead of kill them. It's unclear specifically when they will prefer to capture rather than kill, but it seems like as long as the damage difference does not necessitate extra hits, and the hit rate difference doesn't drop them to 1%, as Thracia caps hit ranges between 1 and 99% instead of 0 and 100, then the AI is likely to prefer capturing over killing your unit if they are able to. The AI also will prioritize capturing units with no weapons, as they can instantly be picked up by any unit with a melee weapon and higher constitution. If an enemy unit captures your unit, they will take as many items from their inventory as possible, and then, if the map has an exit point, they will try to retreat to that point. If an enemy unit escapes, that unit is taken to the jail map Gaiden. If you kill them, then they will drop your unit, who will be holding only the items the enemy had no inventory space left for. The AI script goes beyond combat, however. If enemy dancers have a valid dance target, there is a chance they will dance for them. If an enemy has no weapons, and an armory exists which sells a weapon that they can use, the AI can reportedly move that unit to an armory and purchase a weapon, citation needed. If an enemy is a thief, they can steal from your units. If an enemy has a special staff, such as Tina's Thief Staff, they will use it to steal your items. Enemies with warp and rewarp can use these staves to flee, to healing tiles, or to teleport into range of your army. The AI is not perfect by any means, being so old and trying to do so much, it's bound to run into some issues, but the sheer dynamism of its capabilities is definitely something to admire. I will definitely put a flag into my descriptions of the Thracia AI, as I am not only much less familiar with this than other games, but because it is so dynamic and robust that I have a hard time really quantifying its decision-making abilities. If I've gotten anything wrong here, I apologize again, and ask you to correct me in the comments, preferably with links to video evidence to verify your claims. The Game Boy Advanced Fire Emblem games, Fire Emblems 6, 7, and 8, all run on slightly different versions of the same engine, and thus, most AI targeting rules that apply for one will apply to all three. The general AI decision tree is pretty similar to previous games. First it looks for kills, but it prioritizes avoiding counterattacks before dealing the most damage and then trying to reduce the damage it takes. Finally, but perhaps most notably, the AI in GBA does not have an invalid target clause. Even if the unit will deal 0 damage or has a 0% chance to hit, these facts do not dissuade the humble Game Boy Advanced AI soldier, for he shall attempt the attack all the same, boldly charging headfirst into certain death. Something to note about the Game Boy Advanced era AI is that every enemy acts individually with how the map is at the moment they act, so you will rarely see enemies teaming up to add their total damage together to overcome a foe mathematically, nor will they plan ahead or act out of order to optimize damage for things like Eclipse or other status effects. This makes the Game Boy Advanced AI, in my opinion, among the easiest to understand and exploit. Two quirks of the GBA AI that mess with the steadfast targeting script are low hit points and low weapon durability. If your unit is on low HP, usually below 20 or 30%, the AI will prioritize attacking this low hit point unit as if they believe they can get a kill, even if they are doing far less or even 0 damage compared to another healthy unit. As for weapon durability, any weapon at 2 or 1 durability is considered to not exist as far as the enemy AI is concerned, so that unit will be targeted as if it had no weapons equipped. This allows players to use single-use weapons as temporary distractions to pull fire away from other units. Perhaps the most notable difference between the GBA game's AIs is that, in Fire Emblem 6, status staves were prioritized on units at the bottom of the deployment order, while in other games, they are prioritized more by hit chance. Moving back to home console for Path of Radiance and Radiant Dawn gave these games a stronger engine, and with it a new AI script. As a whole, the AI in Tellius has no valid target check, meaning it will still attack units whom it deals 0 damage to or has 0% chance to hit, provided a more suitable target is not in range. The core decision tree works in the new Provoke, Shade, and Stillness skills into its ordering. It has a numeric algorithm where it weighs a large number of factors and gives every possible option a score. Most strongly weighted are kills, followed seemingly by units that can't retaliate, then roughly sorting by damage they can deal. Provoke and Shade increase or decrease a unit's targeting weight by 50 respectively. How impactful this number specifically is unclear, though Provoke/Shade priority will not usually raise or lower a unit into a different targeting tier. A unit with Shade, that dies to a single hit for instance, will still likely be targeted over a unit with Provoke who survives and retaliates. Finally, the AI will only target a unit with Stillness if there are no other valid targets in range, being given a numeric reduction of 9,999. The actual AI behavior in Radiant Dawn in particular is still being looked at closely, with a massive number of map-specific and unit-specific AI behaviors still being discovered. I do not have time to get into the weeds of them here, but big shout out to Vicious Sal for sliding into my DMs with this info. The healing AI is far more robust than the GBA games, with enemies being aware of their allies' inventories and running to them to trade a vulnerary or elixir if a better healing option isn't available to them. Enemies with Kanto, like in Fire Emblem 4, will move away after attacking to give other enemies a chance to attack on the same turn. In addition to red and green units, Telle's introduced yellow units in partner phase, which take some general directions from you. Setting them to roam will allow their default AI pattern to take over, which is similar to the enemy AI but with some map-specific instructions. Target has them move the most direct route to the target and do nothing else. It is not a target attack command. Halt has them stay still and do absolutely nothing. Avoid gives them the equivalent of strafing AI, where they will move to get outside of enemies' move and attack ranges if possible. As for special unit types, Status Staff AI tends to prefer the units that have the highest hit rate on. Healing staves get used on any units who have activated healing AI. Brigands on Pillage AI and Tellius are very focused on reaching their target villages and rarely attack on enemy phase unless you directly block their route. Map-specific AI patterns exist very frequently, so these rules may not hold true for every specific map. The DS games, Shadow Dragon and New Mystery of the Emblem, have an interesting approach to AI targeting priority. They still focus on killing, then they focus on dealing the most damage, then trying to avoid counterattacks, and finally taking the least damage. However, their way of calculating how much damage they intend to deal or receive takes into account crit chance. Specifically, if a unit has 2% or higher chance to crit, the AI will calculate damage as if those attacks will always crit after looking for straight kills, which will then shift who they attack and may sometimes save your units from being teamed up against if you can manage to avoid the crit. DS Fire Emblem, with FE12 in particular, also utilizes double target and linked AI scripts more often than other games, where, as stated previously, enemy units will not move until at least 2 of them are in attack range of the same player unit, and will then pull as a group. This simple technique is what accounts for a large percentage of Fire Emblem 12's difficulty, as while surviving 1 enemy on the game's harder difficulties can be challenging, surviving 2 or more can be incredibly difficult. As for other general rules, while the AI follows a mostly static movement order, it will adjust its order if one of its units sees a kill. A number of enemy groups have map-specific AI, again like Minerva's strafing AI, or ballisticians who have a mix of defensive or hold position AI, but the mechanical complexities of DS Fire Emblem really come out in other ways outside of the AI script. They're straightforward and simple, but that does not make them easy, just predictable and consistent. The 3DS era was a big one for Fire Emblem AI, with each game having a very different AI behavior. Awakening is probably the most straightforward of the bunch, following up on the now standard AI script of kills, then damage, then not taking counterattacks, but without a valid target check that floors at 0 damage. It is really hard to find examples of units not taking damage from enemies on the harder difficulties, so verifying this claim on Lunatic or Lunatic Plus has been a challenge, so feel free to let me know if I'm wrong on this. The Awakening AI also tries to take advantage of any skills they have, though its implementation is not perfect, and they will often walk headfirst into the skills your units have. They will not, for instance, consider whether your unit has counter or vantage when picking their targets, but if the AI has skills such as Outdoor Fighter or a Weapon Breaker, they will try to position themselves in ways to take advantage of them. As enemies cannot take advantage of pair-up, and often don't have complex skill combos outside of the abuses of Lunatic Plus, the actual unique qualities of Awakening's AI end there. That said, the Fates AI can more than make up for Awakening's simplicity. The base AI behavior of the targeting script in Fates is the same as Awakening, prioritizing kills, then damage, and avoiding counters when possible. The use of skills is also back, and more robust than before, as a larger number of skills can be properly utilized by the AI in powerful ways. The AI on higher difficulties will even respond to certain player skills if they have seen them activate at least once, such as Vantage. However, by far the biggest advancement in the Fates AI is its excellent utilization of the paired stance system. Enemies are explicitly not beholden to the static movement order, and will pre-position themselves to maximize dual attacks, as well as to take advantage of dual guards where applicable. This dynamic AI behavior means the enemy is always calculating how to optimally team up to get kills on your units, and it is far smarter than the every unit for themselves attitude of some earlier games. Combine this with the way enemies with multiple weapons know how to pick the best ones for each situation, can order commands to make optimal use of buffs like rallies or debuffs like seal skills or shuriken debuffs, and will utilize movement abilities like lunge to drag units back behind enemy lines, and there's a reason that the Fates AI stands up through some of the most mechanically complex maps in the series. Speaking of maps, AI royals will utilize dragon veins to their advantage. Often they use them on scripts at specific turns, but every once in a while they will use these more complex or obtuse map design elements to be a surprising turnabout on the player. Shadows of Valentia is seen in some ways as a step back in Fire Emblem AI quality, both from the intensity of Fates as well as an echo back to the tendencies of Gaiden, albeit with some substantial improvements. The overall AI targeting priority is still the classic behavior that we've gotten used to by now, prioritizing kills, then damage, then avoiding counters if possible, with some additional emphasis placed on taking cover and prioritizing attacking units not in cover themselves. This makes sense, considering the massive impact the avoid bonuses from floors, forests, and gravestones can make, as well as the fact that minimum 1 damage means no 0 damage ignorance clause can apply. Enemy randomness, or shackling, makes its controversial return, however, as both witches and cantors check the RNG to see if they are allowed to teleport or summon on any given turn. This is more noticeable with the fact that the turn wheel does not always maintain the same enemy RNG, so sometimes you will rewind after a witch teleports behind your armor knight, only to not have her teleport at all the next attempt. Witches again prioritize teleporting to spaces where they can only target one unit at the edge of their range, trying to pick off stragglers of your army. So, the best counterplay is to not leave your low resistance units alone at the back of your army. While this won't prevent them from being targeted, it will greatly reduce their vulnerability, and as far as I have seen, the majority of teleport bugs from Gaiden do not reappear in Shadows of Valentia. Fire Emblem Three Houses had a lot of complexities going on with player-side mechanics, but, similar to Awakening, the actual enemy AI script has not changed all that much. Target priority is still kills, then damage, then avoiding counters, and like Awakening, the AI is great at utilizing their own skills, but often fail to consider yours, walking headfirst into Vantage and Wrath builds with regularity. A few unique features of Three Houses AI are an expansion on the capabilities of multiple AI factions fighting each other, such as monsters or the split armies of Gronder Field, which mostly involves just opening up any non-allied factions as viable targets. The AI also has to manage targeting area of effect attacks, with monster recharge moves, which will tend to maximize damage across the total number of units in the initially targeted area. Battalions are a unique Three Houses feature that the AI is only somewhat skilled at using. The AI will not usually change its default movement order to utilize battalion gamuts to let allies deal more damage, nor will the AI hold them back to specifically hit multiple units. However, they will use gamblets preferentially to normal attacks if available, so long as their regular attacks would not deal significantly more damage. This makes battalion leading enemies into a somewhat effective counter to certain oppressive enemy phase builds like Battalion Wrath or Vantage, although the limited number and shaky accuracy still lets these builds be extremely effective. Currently the newest game in the main series, Engage has a combat AI that is slightly different from the other recent games in a few key ways. First is the targeting priority. While we still look for kills first if a unit is on low HP, it will always prioritize dealing the most damage over everything else after that, completely ignoring features such as Chain Guard that would have prevented said damage. This allows strategies involving Lucina's dual guard to be incredibly successful, so long as the unit with Lucina is not the lowest defense unit of the group. Most notably, Engage is probably the most dynamic Fire Emblem game when it comes to movement order. Rather than sticking to a strict deployment order and working down the line, Engage allows for a variety of situations to prompt enemies to move in different orders than they normally would. The most basic is that, if backup units are able to attack a target that other units can attack, the backup unit will always move first in an attempt to set up a chain attack. If an enemy is warp capable, they will act before their target, so their target can attack after being warped. If an enemy can break one of your units, they will do so before another unit attacks to make use of the counter-free attack opportunity. It is simple ordering changes like these that make Engage's AI feel so much more fresh and dynamic than many of the games that came before it. Another benefit Engage's AI has is its utilization of special skills and multiple weapons. Wyrms will choose to use their more powerful 1-3 range attacks if possible, but they will use their 4 range attacks if it lets them attack weaker targets. If an enemy key adept stops adjacent to one of its friendly units, it will chain guard if it's at 100% HP, and will prioritize chain guards instead of attacking unless it is injured and chain guards are not possible, or it can get a kill or a break. Enemies with emblems will prioritize their engage attacks, usually after depleting a health bar, and will try to make use of their most effective weapon of their pool for the situation. It is some complex calculation going on in the background, but the Engage AI has proven it can handle it. Something interesting to know about the Engage AI is that data miners have found that break and chain attack priority are determined by AI flags, and that not every enemy in the game has these flags. More work is still being done to figure this out at the time of this writing, so if you want these specifics, check out the Triangle Attack website, link in the description. The final thing to note about Engage's AI is that, as far as I can tell, this may be the only time that the base targeting AI behavior changes depending on difficulty. If you are playing on Maddening, the AI will never choose to attack a unit it either deals 0 damage to or has 0% hit chance against, unless it can deal meaningful damage via chain attacks or other effects. However, if you are playing on any lower difficulty, the AI does not have this ignorance clause, and will gladly waste attacks on impervious or unhittable tanks. For this reason, certain units, abilities, and strategies have a far greater viability on lower difficulties compared to higher ones, not only because of their stats, but because they abuse AI behavior that works differently than it does in Maddening. And that's every Fire Emblem game. That was truly a lot to get through. But before we wrap it up, there is one last thing I need to mention when it comes to the AI, and that is green units. Across all games that have them, people have noticed that the AI often prefers to target green units over your own. This is not a hard and fast rule, but it makes sense when you consider the target priority script. As most green units tend to be weaker, easier to kill, and dealing less damage back, it's only natural that the enemy would prioritize green units. In fact, the majority of the time, there's not actually any hard coding of green unit targeting. The green unit just tends to be the most viable target following normal calculations. This is also why temporary units, like the Fire Emblem 2 Fog Soldiers, Fire Emblem 8 Phantoms, and Engage Lyn duplicates, are highly prioritized most, but not all, of the time. They are usually the easiest thing to kill, but if another unit takes significantly more damage at a better hit rate, or is at critically low hit points and thus attracts more attention, these disposable decoys may not have their intended effect of protecting the real units in your army. As for why green units behave so stupidly, charging headfirst into enemy bosses instead of staying safe, I can't fully explain that, but something in their AI gives priority to certain enemies. Sometimes those bosses have lower defense than the Arbor Knights the green unit otherwise would attack. Honestly, if I were to change green unit AI, I would increase the priority of avoiding counters and mitigating damage received, similar to the path of Radiance AI script, rather than causing them to suicide in attempts to just deal the most damage possible. And with that, I think our masterclass on Fire Emblem AI behavior can come to a close. I hope you learned something valuable for your next playthrough of whatever game you're running. If you know something that I missed, or if anything I said here is false and you can prove it, feel free to leave your explanations in the comments below. I know I've been teasing this video for years at this point, and it's been hanging over my head too, but I just couldn't rest without giving this the best shot that I could. I know that more information has likely come out since my initial draft of the script, and more will continue to come forth as people dig into the codes and find more details, but for 5,000 subscribers, I couldn't do anything less than give you exactly what most of you came here for. If you like this video, check out my deep dives into units in Unit Design 101 on the side right here. And of course, a massive shout out to all the members of the Leguse Guard who have kept subscribed or who have even just dropped off during this time when I was making this video. I know it took over a month to make one video and you really deserved more, but thank you so much for sticking around anyway. That includes Royal Laguz Guard members The Forgotten L, Minirop and Slash Spade, and Laguz Guard members L, Enigmatic Mr. L, Mad Moke, Bro Duderman, Kumi, Miss Mesmerism, Drumstep 913, Swamp Mist, Merlinin, Reely, and Virota. Thank you all so much for all your support, and until next time, this is Mithril Zenith, finally on the AI video, signing out.